Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Jess.
Hello, world.
And Alex.
June is here. This is exciting. Like, it feels like
June.
summer.
Feels like
If
summer.
that's a song. I'm
like
surprised
summer.
you guys didn't sing it.
Although I don't think it's officially summer yet. Isn't that some
Is
other
it
time in
the
June?
end of June, I think.
Like, I feel like June 22nd is what is popping
what I
up in
was
my
thinking,
head,
too.
but let's fact
Good thing
check
we
that
didn't
real
look this
quick.
up before we started the show. Let's just do live fact checking now. Everyone enjoy
June
this
is also
moment.
my birthday month.
Oh, is it?
21st.
Yep.
June
We were
21st.
so
I
close.
was so close.
What's your birthday?
June 2nd.
Wow.
Just kicking off the month.
Happy birthday.
My daughter Maddie,
you.
her birthday's June 4th.
June birthdays.
Yeah,
Love it.
It's a big deal.
That is a big deal.
My puppy at home, his name is Jake, and his birthday is June 3rd.
We're so close.
Today
Yeah.
is your birthday, Jess.
Oh, thank you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday
to
you.
whole
Do you want us
thing?
to drop
We had
your
to-
Venmo?
We also had to fact
Cash
check the date. We had
Cash
to
App.
fact check.
What's the date?
Cash App at Alex Ely, and I will make sure Jess gets your
Yeah,
birthday
sure.
presents
Yeah.
from her.
Thanks,
so
guys. Thanks for remembering,
you did
Alex.
it. You did it. You were born.
Wow. I've lived
Happy
a long
birthday.
time.
Cash up Alex Ely, and then he'll buy you a present with that
Yes.
gift. I'm thinking like an electric scooter or something.
I was
Yeah,
thinking
don't
a
know.
stroller.
A stroller.
Bob
We'll
stroller.
see.
One of the two. I can hook you guys up.
But he's probably, if he got Venmo'd the money, he would obviously invest it into his pool because by then it's like up and running. 'Cause
Yeah, you got to get the cleaning done.
Memorial Day just happened.
It's
Yeah.
full
You know,
time.
pools are opening.
Yeah. Do we have any voicemails? I mean, that's our favorite. You can always leave us a voicemail at 402-885-9930. Do we have one?
We've got one. Here it is.
All right, let's listen.
I'm curious to know, on a scale of most underrated to least underrated, or maybe most overrated, most underrated to most overrated, rank the social media apps that you've got.
Oh. Rank them that I actually have.
That
So is
was
that
like
like best to
taking me out
worst,
of-
pretty much?
That was taking me on a journey because he kept
Let me-
saying overrated and underrated. And I'm like, what is it? Restaurants, movies,
Where's
people?
that was what a voicemail. I mean, it kept us on
It
the
really
edge of our
kept me
seat.
Yeah.
on edge. My heart was pounding.
Like
a little
Eric
bit.
was getting ready to put the one
1 to
finger
10,
up
and it
for
was
1 to
that.
10, and
No.
then he juked us on that.
Yeah, I was all over.
Ooh,
Jacob
nice.
is the caller there.
Okay.
I won't drop
Jacob.
Thank
last
you.
name since he didn't provide it for us. We don't
Very
want people,
tantalizing.
What is that called? Doxing him.
Yeah, I don't want to dox him. I'm
Voicemail.
gonna say we should probably leave off ones that aren't. I mean, there's like a true. Are we gonna put like true
It's ones that
social?
we have. He said.
Oh, the ones we
the
have.
ones that you've got.
Well, okay, that
Hold
still
on.
doesn't help.
Okay, yeah. Okay, now
Hold
this
on.
is
I'm
really where
writing
things
him
are getting
down 'cause
interesting. Parlay.
Parlor.
I'm a
Parlor.
user.
All right, is it Parlay? I
don't
forgot. There was a.
Oh no, I don't even have that.
I got to see what apps I have. I mean, every one that comes around, I just sign up for it. So I there's probably a long list at the
Google
bottom.
Plus.
No, okay.
What was the one they
That one
used
got
to
shut
have?
down.
Google. It was before Plus. Those like Waves or something like that.
MySpace.
Right. Okay. Well, we're just gonna do prevalent.
Most-
ones we have,
Okay.
Right.
Just go to your.
I'm gonna write them down. Okay.
Just
I
go
have
to your
Facebook,
screen time and-
TikTok, Snapchat, Twitter, Instagram, and Be Real.
That's what you have. And
That's
so
what I have.
what's the order? What would
But
you
I'm
say?
just. Do you have others?
Do I have others?
Yeah. Like
yeah.
I feel like those are
Marco
kind of the main
Polo
one.
is another one I have. Is that
Oh, I
social
have- I
media?
know.
It seems like so many apps now too have like a social media component. Like even we were
Yeah.
talking in message team today, like the Bible app, there's like a social media component to that.
There's-
like Strava has like we have a. By the way, if you're somebody that likes to exercise and all that, we have a CCC group on Strava. So make sure you guys look CCC Omaha up on there.
There's like Clubhouse. I don't think that's doing anything anymore.
No.
That was the audio one. Vero is another one that was trying to take off that didn't. LinkedIn is a social network. I don't use it much.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go.
See,
let's
So
this
just
can
do the
really
ones.
get- this
LinkedIn
really
is
can
my
get
most
complicated.
overrated. I'm not a huge fan of it.
Yeah.
What?
LinkedIn, out of the ones that I have.
But that's just because you're a servant of the Lord. You're not about
yeah.
that career life.
I'm not
So
trying to
you're
just jump from one place to the next and flex.
If somebody
I'm the
saw you
noon
like
ball.
really active on LinkedIn, they'd be like, "Oh,
Yeah.
did you
I
see
totally
did
get-
you see Alex? You
I
know,
totally do get people
getting a little
that
flashy
use
on-
LinkedIn. Like they always remind me of when my anniversary is. Like I get messages from people, "Happy work anniversary." I'm like, I had no clue. So thank you, those of you that see that. Okay, so I've got
the ones
LinkedIn.
you use. Like
Okay.
worst to
LinkedIn
best.
is probably worst.
Okay.
Then probably Snapchat.
Oh, I
And
use
then-
Snapchat all the time.
This is my moment.
Yeah, this is Alex.
So LinkedIn,
sorry, Jess.
Snapchat.
He would be tearing me apart at this point.
Can I
So
just
I'm
finish?
that's what I'm saying.
I know
The
it's your
listeners
birthday.
know that you would be doing this to me. All right,
Well,
go ahead.
We're
I'll
gonna let
listen.
Jess go. It's her
I'll
birthday.
listen.
She obviously is
No, I
feeling
care.
herself
Let
on
me
the
just
birthday.
put on my
so-
listening hat. Go ahead.
No, it's your birthday.
I want you to go.
Okay, please finish, Alex.
Okay, LinkedIn. I just got a
He's got to recollect.
text from my wife. Sorry,
Uh-oh.
Bluetooth.
she's frustrated with me. I'm sorry. Anyway, we're
Maybe I
going
should have gone
LinkedIn,
first.
Snapchat. Then I'm gonna go with Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Be Real. That's my current June 2nd.
Twitter's not-
Jess's
doesn't even
birthday.
make it on there?
Twitter.
You don't-
I didn't even. Twitter's
Wow,
probably my
that's gotta
number
be-
one used app.
Oh,
for sure.
wow.
Not
And you
not
just
because I
forgot
tweet
it.
a ton, but mostly because
That's where you get your news.
a lot of news information. I found out a lot of stuff just on Twitter. So
Jess?
that's my list.
Jess, go for
Birthday girl.
I feel like. Okay, I had to write down all the ones. I'm going to go. Probably my least used is Twitter. I'll get the little notifications if there's news, but I don't really use it. Instagram is probably next. Like I scroll, but I don't really post on Instagram. I use Be Real and Snapchat every day to keep up with family, friends. I love to scroll on TikTok. And I'm a little disappointed. To date, have you gotten a "you should stop scrolling" video?
No, I probably am not on TikTok as much as I should be. Like Eric probably knows that because he sends me messages sometimes and it's
he
like
doesn't
2 weeks.
respond.
Usually I'm on the church's account because I'll post from there or
Yeah.
I'll post on the podcast. So then switching back to my personal account,
All right,
I always
well, back to
forget.
me.
So if that algorithm is messed
Sorry.
up, I'll know why. I'll be like, Alex,
know why.
looking at this.
Here it is. My problem, and this is one I will never admit to any of my teen clients or
Yeah.
anyone outside of this, but Facebook is probably my most used. That's
Boomer.
probably what I would post on.
Yeah.
I don't post on it a lot, but it's helpful
Like if
for
I
birthdays.
shared a picture.
Birthday.
Yeah,
It is like
it
my
comes
birthday
in handy.
calendar.
I probably
Yeah.
check it the most out of the, like if I were to open one.
Okay,
So-
I'm gonna go.
and we save the best for last.
I'm a
Eric.
Snapchat is like I don't use that anymore. It's a trash app. Sorry, Jess. it's full of. It's not good.
I mean, there is bad uses for it. I would not condone
I don't.
that part.
What do you use it for primarily?
I
Do you
just like snap my family. I have my
you
family
like share
all
stories.
across.
on
Yeah.
there. Oh, your family. Okay.
Yeah.
So I
I'm
think
not
that's a big
one
deal.
of those people
like,
that like add.
if you
anybody.
have connections on there, I just never really did. So
Well, I was friends with you on there.
Snapchat's the bottom. I'm gonna say link. I don't have any friends on there.
Austin's laughing.
Oh, you broke Austin with that comment. Okay, Snapchat, LinkedIn, then Facebook, then probably Be Real, then Instagram, then Twitter, then TikTok.
Are we
So
counting
that's-
Marco Polo? Like, is that?
I feel like that's a realm of its own. 'cause I
Yeah,
would
it could
not
be. It's social media. Yeah, I mean, I would put Discord in mine somewhere too, like probably under like Discord, Twitter, TikTok. Those are my top.
There
three.
we are. Well, there
it is.
you have it.
Yeah, I hope we answered your question.
People are either
There's
gonna
a
love
lot
us
of
or hate us.
deliberation there.
I know.
There's probably a lot of people who are just like, I don't use social media.
Mm-hmm.
So.
One of my favorite things about the
Wait, what about
voicemails-
YouTube?
YouTube, yeah,
That's my number one. If we're counting that as a social media,
I just don't. I don't know.
That's number
I'm
one.
so old that like it wasn't a social media when it started, and I
Yeah.
feel like it's definitely become that.
I mean, it maybe always was, and we just didn't define it correctly.
yeah, maybe. But I one of the things I have loved about this last, I don't know, we don't really call it a season, is these voicemails. It's always fun to hear that. Have more fan, listener, whatever you want to call it. Probably listeners more than fans is the correct term.
Yeah. Uncomfies.
Interaction, the uncomfies, which I think maybe we're settling on. And we have one faithful listener, and they probably give us more feedback than anybody, and grateful for that. That's like, hey, I want to help maybe those who enjoy listening to the podcast and enjoy maybe being challenged in some of his thoughts around Christianity and culture, to maybe take a step further instead of just listening to the podcast, but have a space to like talk about things, to say what Alex said was so dumb, or maybe some of the books that we've talked about. So they're like, hey, can we start an uncomfy book club where they would read some of the books or some of the things maybe we talk about, and have more discussion in depth about it, which I think is a great idea. And so that'll probably launch in the fall, but we're trying to just drum up some interest. If you're somebody that is like, hey, I'd like to be a part of that, like move from just hearing or listening to the podcast, but to having more conversation about these things, and it's challenged you, then send us an email. So we're trying to put together a little bit of a list of people that would be interested in that.
I'm assuming you don't have to just be local.
No, you don't have to be local. And so that'll be an email podcast, at cccomaha.org, or you can send us a DM on TikTok or Instagram. We're just trying to gauge interest right now, see who's interested. And I think I'm excited for the possibility of people having more discussion about this. And so kind of a new development we'll be teasing out. I teased it out a little bit last week on the episode, but want you guys to know about maybe a way to plug in a little deeper. So thanks for voicemails and those who do send us feedback. It really is helpful, and looking forward to seeing how that kind of evolves. So,
all right. That does it for our ranking of social media. But up next, we've got headlines. Okay, our first headline comes to us all the way from WOWT.com.
Local.
This one was sent in by an avid listener. From what I hear, he listens every week. That's Austin, the producer. And I think this...
I beg to differ. He's really good at switching the camera, but I don't know how engaged he is every week.
Okay. Well, he sent this in. I think he thinks maybe he found Alex's pool contractor here. Omaha homeowner files lawsuit when contractor fails to build pool after $86,000 were paid. Alex, how are you feeling about that loss there?
Yeah, it was tough. 2 years of my salary all down the drain.
Oh, man. Well, Memorial Day seems to be a traditional start to the outdoor swimming season, it says here in this article. That's when one Omaha family hopes to take a dip in their new pool, but the 2-year project has been filled with delays, and it led to this lawsuit. So anyways, be careful with
Alex.
who you're contracting.
So
pools.
sorry.
To be clear, if anyone's new to the show, this is not Alex. He did not.
I also do not have a pool.
Yeah.
Let me confirm that, clarify that one more time.
Allegedly. Have you ever... We haven't recently seen his backyard.
We've continued to just leave it more of a mystery, whether you have a pool or not, but we'd like to imagine you do.
But
all right, that was kind of a joke headline, but thank you to Austin for sending that one in. Really appreciate that. All right, but we do have a real headline. It's pretty interesting. This one comes from businessinsider.com. It says, a high school approved a student's graduation speech that was written by ChatGPT. Then he went majorly off script.
Nebraska making the big time news. Business Insider.
Wow, this was Grand Island, huh?
It was.
Okay. So it says add speech writing to a long list of things that ChatGPT can do. Kenny Morales, a former student of Grand Island Senior High School in Nebraska, used OpenAI's conversational chatbot to produce a speech for his high school graduation ceremony. The Grand Island Independent first reported, I said, give me a speech about gratitude. And I gave specific examples about what I wanted it to include, is what Morals told Nebraska TV News. The speech got the go-ahead from Morale's school, but when he got on stage, he gave a completely different speech than was approved.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's such a fascinating thing. I mean, crazy. And that student, shout out to them, I guess, for beating the system in some kind of way, because obviously, like, the school's like, you have to have your speech approved. You have to write it out and have it approved before they'll let you get on stage and give the speech. And so Chat GPT, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more sometime, it's due for sure, about AI and all that kind of stuff. But just fascinating. That this was bound to happen at some point, where someone just has a bogus speech and it impresses people. You are able to get up in front of people and then all of a sudden go off script a little bit. And
so he went on in his actual speech to say, I don't know about y'all, but I hated school. That line was definitely not in the speech. And he continued by discussing issues he had with the school's culture and blamed the school's district's administrators for making decisions without transparency. So in some ways, getting your voice heard this way is kind of ingenious, whether people agree or disagree.
Out. I mean, he planned it out, that's for sure.
I'm just imagining like the big sheep herder's cane coming on stage and pulling him off. But
yeah, was he able to give the whole thing? Were people just sitting there shocked?
I do believe he like finished. I mean, it wasn't a super long speech, but I think he got through it. But to be in the person, like, obviously as this is happening, the administrators, like, there's probably some that didn't actually read it, and they're like, you guys let this through?
Yeah.
Just like the aftermath of that. And he's a senior, it's his graduation, so maybe they hold his transcript. I remember, like, when I was graduating high school, they're like, if you do anything silly during graduation, we're gonna hold your diploma. Like, if you, there was like the year before us, there was like a fake hand, like a guy had, and then went to shake so they tried to threaten us, like, your real diploma's not in that, in the, the thing they give you if you do anything silly. But at that point, it's like, what are they going to do?
It says Hank McFarland, who's the president of the school's district board of education, was not very happy. He said, short story made long, does the student have valid concerns? Yes. But was it correct what he did? No, according to McFarland, which, I mean, I think anytime any organization comes under scrutiny and it's done in a public way, that that organization always claims it was done or handled inappropriately. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but sometimes change doesn't happen unless people are held accountable. And I don't think people are held accountable if things aren't made public. But I don't know. What do you take? What's your take on it?
I think it's also brave of someone that's, I don't know, I'm assuming 17, 18 to get up and do something like that. I mean, it's pretty passionate. I don't think I don't know if the average person at that age is going to use that moment to do that.
Yeah, I haven't fully, I didn't listen to the whole speech, and they don't have the entire, what he actually communicated. So I think there's definitely lines that could be blurred inside of what that speech is if it was overly critical and all that kind of stuff. But it does seem like maybe the school district's saying, there's valid concerns and all of that. And so hopefully at the end of the day, it leads towards these concerns being addressed, people having conversations, maybe more students feeling the freedom to go speak up and have someone say, yeah, I experienced that too. And now they actually have to take it seriously. So
this is going to be a rabbit hole. I'm sorry, but this is where my brain is taking me. I was recently watching an episode of Hell's Kitchen with Gordon Ramsay, where he goes into these bad.
We have to believe that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
It's in the Bible. The word is. But a lot of times these scenarios play out the same, where the staff that are employed by these restaurants all see how terrible it is, and they all, and they either kind of fall in line or they become complacent, and it just keeps getting out of hand. And then someone like Ramsey will come in there, who's a celebrity, and then just starts kind of giving it to people pretty straight, in a way that almost makes you feel uncomfortable. You're like, oh, ouch, that's got to hurt that person's feelings. But by the end, those people a lot of times are so thankful and in tears about it, because they just didn't see another path through what they were facing. And so I think, not to say this is the correct way to handle things all the time, but I do think there is sometimes a lot of positive change can happen from something being aired out, like your dirty laundry just getting aired out in the public, because you go, okay, there's nothing I can do now. Now everybody knows, and I have to face this. I have to make a change. And I don't know, so in some ways, I know this makes people uncomfortable, but a lot of times in culture, we're just told we have to assimilate. We have to be a certain way. We have to talk a certain way. We have to act a certain way, or we're not going to be accepted. But a lot of that leads to complacency, where we kind of become part of the problem without even realizing it. And so, I don't know.
And I think it seems like the student was talking about culture in general and not calling out specific, like doxing people or calling out specific names or, you know, instances like that, but was just calling out the culture of the school in general, and not like, this teacher, here's my beef with you. Principal, this is my beef with, you know, like these, his own personal kind of vendettas against people, but rather at large, the culture of the school that most of the students experience. And so I think that would be a little different if there was, you know, a specific, I have a vendetta against somebody and I'm going to use this to, you know, cast them in a poorer light where they don't have any availability or ability to defend themselves, which I think is different, calling out a system versus like a person that can't really defend itself.
And to me, he had an issue and he was innovative. He saw a problem and like, how am I going to solve it? And that's like a skill that you really look for in kids that age, where you see an issue, like, how are you going to fix it? How are you going to master it? And so,
problem
it's a
solver
good quality to have.
And he leveraged AI, so he didn't have to write a fake speech. There it is. All right. Well, that does it for our headlines today. Up next, we're going to be talking a little bit about, I don't know if you've heard this term. It's kind of a new term to me, but it's reply ASAP culture, which is reply as soon as possible, and what that does to, you know, our mental health in general, of always being on and needing to respond. That rhymed. That was unintentional, but stay tuned. As we mentioned earlier, we're going to be talking about reply ASAP culture. A little bit of a definition here to help us understand what this means as we delve into this conversation. Reply ASAP culture is a pervasive expectation of immediate responses in various communication platforms, including email, messaging apps, and social media. It highlights how technological advancements and increased connectivity have facilitated this cultural shift where people feel pressured to respond instantly to messages regardless of time constraints or personal boundaries. Has anyone related to that feeling of your boundaries being blurred or feeling like you've got to respond to someone? No?
I feel like I see this a lot in my own personal life, but I also see it a lot, I don't know, in my office when I'm working with clients. And so I think it's very pervasive. I think it's maybe not something that everyone would admit or recognize right away, but even our conversation today, I kind of had the thought about it, because a lot of times when the three of us are planning for podcasts or somebody comes up with an idea, one of us usually will text our group chat. And we ended up, I mean, and it's like, who knows when we're going to have the idea. So it's kind of like ambiguous when that starts. And so it was sometime this week that one of us started texting. It wasn't me, so one of you guys.
Definitely me.
It was definitely
Alex. He's our little instigator, which we are thankful for. But I just saw and then I think, Eric, you replied, and then, you know, Alex has just got to get it in there. You got to get going with the text messages. And so I wasn't able to read it, and I just kept seeing that it was unread, and I started feeling like anxious because, first of all, I don't want to let Alex down. I know that there's a deadline. I'm like, Eric is probably like thinking something about me, like, okay, they're engaged, they're not.
No, usually I get those texts and I'm making dinner for my family is when I get the text from Alex.
But
and I'm just like, I'm not going to respond right now.
But there was something that came up where it was just like, this is way more of an issue for me than it is for them. And I'm putting pressure on myself and adding so much to being like that I'm going to let you guys down. And it just kind of like look how it just like I start rolling down a hill. It's just one text leads me to like I'm sweating and I feel like I'm going to let you guys down. Maybe that's a little extreme.
If this needs to be your intervention, please don't put that much pressure on yourself.
It was good though for me to have the awareness to notice that. I did that. And I instantly thought of the other conversations I've had over the last year. I think a lot more since COVID, where a text message comes in or a notification comes in. I think it's a lot of times on our phones where something pops up and I can't just let it sit. And so we obviously started talking about that and doing more research, and it is obviously an issue. But it's also a hard thing to set boundaries around. And I think I've been on a journey to figure that out. And I think that's where I really noticed I did it all of a sudden this last week, where I'm like, oh, you're doing that again.
Yeah.
When it seems like even now, I mean, this has all happened so fast. If you even think of 20 years ago, 30 years ago, which in the scheme of the world are not that far gone, like where people had to send letters and like you had to call people only at a certain time and call a home phone, like all of that, like the advancements in all of this. And then, email was kind of the even corporate before it was more personal based kind of communication. And now companies, just text messages are everywhere. We've got chat bubbles on every single website. You've got a million different ways that you can interact with the company. You can call them, you can have a chat bot, you can have so many different things that we're, I think, becoming so programmed to expect immediacy and immediate results. And then you've got like the text bubbles on a lot of places. And I think, again, another place that technology companies are seeing, we've kind of programmed people in an unhealthy way, because a lot of them are trying to create like, hey, you can send later or remind yourself instead of sending that email right now. Like one of the latest things in iOS was that you could send, an email and program it to send at a certain time just through iOS. There's of course been different kinds of helps or, bots that have been able to do that in the future, but like they're trying to integrate it just into the software system where, okay, you can start to set some of these boundaries. That's what focus mode and a lot of this is, but it's almost seems like we've gotten so far into it. I know for me, like when I'm trying to put focus modes on or I'm trying to maybe rein that stuff in, I'm like so programmed at this point that it's difficult to, once I've like crossed those barriers to like start to rein it back in and have, some of that focus time, or to like, if I've already established with a certain person, maybe that I respond to them pretty quickly, then I feel like if I start to rein it in, I'm going to be letting them down, kind of like what you were saying, Jess. If I try to put up barriers for myself or limit myself to not be on my phone from a certain time to a certain time and fully engage with my family, then, I feel like if I don't go explain that to that person and they don't know it, then they're going to be wondering, what's happening.
Well, even I think for me, there's things like Apple has implemented these focus modes where you can set them up and have them go scheduled for certain times of the day. And all I can think about when I start to set those up is there's always going to be an exception to the rule. There always is. And then I just don't do it because I'm like, there's going to be that one time that someone that I didn't, deem important
wasn't in the circle.
Isn't in the circle. They're going to text me something that is important. I'm going to miss it. And maybe that's like a FOMO thing, but also there's just, there's urgent family matters, things like that could happen. And if you don't, okay, well, how big do I make this circle? Or maybe there is urgent, work matters and things like that, so many times our personal lives cross over with our work lives and vice versa. And so it's just like, how do you balance that? And I was probably much harder on myself. I could feel your pain, Jess, when you were sharing at the beginning, because I was very much that way for a long time, where I just felt like I have to respond immediately. I owe them that. Like I owe this person a response. And I will say I've had to let that go, because there are just some times where I'm in the middle of something and it is going to be more detrimental to me, the person I'm responding to, the person I'm ignoring in that situation, if I respond in that moment. And once I got over that, then I had to get over apologizing every time when I was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry I didn't get back to you."
Exactly.
And now I'm finally at the point where I just respond when I can, and I read that message and go, I have to ask myself, is this something urgent? Can it wait? Will this person understand if I don't send a message right away? And I kind of have to hope that. And if it comes up later, well, why did you not respond to me? Then, we can talk about it. But normally I think people know, hey, I sent this to you around dinner time, or hey, I sent this to you when you're at work. So of course you couldn't respond right away, or different things like that. So you start to hope those things are built into place where we just understand. I know, you even messaged us the other day. You're like, I've got, clients all day back to back. Like I don't have time to do certain things, so we have to understand people are in different places. And I think that's the thing for me that I had to acknowledge when I didn't get the response that I wanted from someone, is like, oh, okay, I've been in that position. And so many of the times when we're the person sending the message, we're not putting ourselves in the shoes of the other person and just realizing they could be in any number of scenarios right now. Even, their phone died, whatever it might be, so you just have to have grace and patience.
It almost feels to me like, and Alex, you can probably speak to this, like technology moved so quickly and grew so fast that us as a culture then kind of had to adapt and say, well, we have all of this right at our fingertips all of a sudden, and so do our kids. And now what do we do? It's like having, like not being able to have, I don't know, candy. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, like, leaving your house and being able to like do whatever you want. And it just feels like everything was so accessible that we've kind of had to figure out what that means for ourselves. And now it feels like, because it's been happening for so long, we're at a place where now we're responding to it, and now we're setting boundaries and kind of noticing it.
Yeah.
But I feel like for a while it was like, wow, everything is right here in my hand.
I remember when Apple first introduced push notifications, and it was a big deal. And I was so frustrated with the email app because it was still only updating every 15 minutes because Gmail hadn't done whatever they needed to do to their servers to update that. So I was looking for all kinds of workarounds and all this because I thought, man, if that would be just great to get my email immediately when it came through. And now I don't even have my email notifications pop up on my screen or my watch or anything. It just, I go check my email when I want to check it. And so I think it's just changed. Cause for me, I'm like an early adapter. So I want that. I want the newest and the latest and the greatest, but with no consideration for how it's affecting my mental health or my family life or anything like that.
What I think's so hard, what is for millennials, is that we just had it. Like nobody parented us in any of this. Like, so nobody trained us on like, how do you manage this? Like one of our goals probably as parents is like to, by the time our kids are moving out of our house, to try to prepare them as much as they can to manage time, to manage the budget, to manage so many things and be ready to go out into this big world, right? And so, but for all of us, we never had any of that, and nobody taught us how to put boundaries on, and so we just don't, because we haven't been shepherded or discipled or just taught, in how to do that. And then gradually, like you said, Eric, like push notifications showed up, and then the next thing shows up, and so much of this stuff has like enhanced our life, I think, for a while. Like even, text messaging or email, but then marketers are able to get a hold of it. And then,
can you imagine we used to leave our house and that was it.
Yeah.
You could not get contacted. Like, unless someone knew that maybe you went to this restaurant or you were at this business and they had to call the business, they had to page you at Walmart or something. There was, maybe pagers for a while or cell phones, but there was a time when it was just, you left your house and you were just off the grid.
I remember traveling out of the country, and it was a time before, Verizon, like their international plans were like $30 a minute. And I was in this town, and it was like I didn't have a cell phone, just the feeling of like, and I think about it often because I don't know if it will ever happen again, where I'm at a place in the world where nobody knows where I am and nobody could get a hold of me or find me right now. They'd have like a good idea, but we don't have those moments very often because we're so accessible now. And I will think back to that because it just seems so
foreign.
And we even have those experiences that our kids won't have because our technology is so advanced now.
Well, I think we have been sold in almost any kind of capacity that unlimited is the best ever, right? So like unlimited internet, unlimited access to text messages, unlimited phone calls, unlimited, like you just have unlimited access. And I remember even like as a, when I first got a cell phone, like that wasn't reality, right? Like it wasn't unlimited. So you started to take a little bit more of an inventory about, is this important enough to cut into my 500 minutes that I have? And same with text messages, you had like 140 characters plus like 250 text messages a month.
Yeah.
And so you became much more thoughtful and creative about, how you can squeeze all that into like a certain, amount of characters. And so
imagine if we had emoji, then we could have really tightened
so
it
much
up.
you could have just done. So I think this unlimited culture has really, and I think it ultimately becomes this discipleship type of conversation where we think that freedom is in having whatever we want whenever we want it, when really at the end of the day it puts us in bondage, right? Like it puts us always accessible to everybody, always on the go, always, and it starts to give us the bondage of anxiety and the bondage of stress and the bondage of all those things when we're unable to put limits on all of these things. And so even for myself as a parent, I'm always trying to think of like, okay, there's this lie that freedom is in no restrictions, but really when we have restrictions, that actually leads to freedom. When we actually put disciplines in our life, it actually leads us to living a life with a little less stress and a little bit more ability to maybe live a more healthy lifestyle. It's just buffets and unlimited everything is kind of what we sell, and phone companies sell, and everybody sells that there's no limits to anything, and it starts to do something.
It is
to
a
us.
perversion of the idea of freedom too. I
is.
think in a lot of ways. I mean, you look at cell phones. I think I was just looking. It's like 1973 was the first cell phone, and very few people had it. But that's only been 50 years of humanity. Only 50 years. Like if you're looking, that's like a drop in the bucket of the entire time that humans have been on this planet. 50 years we've had that. I mean, even you mentioned buffets, and that's like in the 40s, maybe in Vegas was one of the first times that the idea of all you can eat was ever a thing. Still very under less than 100 years of an idea of we just get everything we want and we should because we're free, right?
And because I have access to it, we almost get fooled into thinking if I don't take as much as I can of that, then I'm not doing it right, right? Like, I mean, I think of like when I've gone on, like my honeymoon to all inclusive. There's just this idea of like all inclusive means like engorge myself, take advantage of everything, no limits, do whatever you want. And very rarely, if I go to a buffet, if I put no limits on it, doesn't work out really well for me. I'm going to be feeling those consequences. And I think more than physically, we're starting to see those consequences spiritually and mentally and emotionally.
For sure.
And we're playing a catch-up game right now. And so like phrases like this that are being introduced into psychology are helpful for us to, even though maybe we've walked too far, to figure out how do we start to walk back and maybe start to save ourselves to breathe a little bit, but also how do I teach my kids?
Right.
How do we teach the next generation when we see a mental health epidemic happening in our world? Like how do we start to acknowledge these things and start to reel these things in more? I think we're at kind of this weird spot in culture where hopefully we begin to have an awareness and learn from it.
I think one thing that I see a lot is anxiety and really stress also being triggered by this, because our response now is also being so closely tied to relationships and love, and how much I value you and care about you is determined by the amount of time between one text message to the other, or if I've opened this text message or this email or not. And I think in some ways I see it replacing community. So it's like I can text you, and so maybe I'm not going to get together or I'm not going to come outside and talk to you, or like I can text my neighbor. I see her outside, but I'll just ask her later. Or it's replacing something, and it's kind of changing what love and relationship looks like. And I think when that happens, it's exactly what I kind of illustrated in the beginning, where our rabbit trails can just go. I can think, well, I didn't open it, so Alex probably thinks I'm lazy, and Eric just probably thinks I'm not engaged in the podcast. Like, I wasn't thinking that, but I'm just saying, like, those are examples of how that anxiety just keeps going and going and going, when ultimately it's isolating.
Yeah.
As well. What was the other thought I had?
Well, I hate to admit, like, while you're thinking, how often, like, I have gone down those rabbit trails, whether it's like a text to my wife, or like even if it's like a group text to friends, and, you know, like the conversation's going, you know, for a while, and then all of a sudden, you know, somebody bows out of the conversation, or they stop responding. Like, how quickly I can start to create the worst case scenarios in my mind, or like I start to reread everything I wrote. Like, wait, did I say this in an offensive way? Did I make them mad? What happened? And literally 99.9% of the time, something else came up. They were busy. They should not have been responding to the text messages, and that's why they're not. But I just so quickly, probably because of my own insecurities, start to let that overwhelm me and start to like wonder about, are we okay? Like, are Aaron and I okay? Or are me and this friend okay? Because they didn't respond. And so it's crazy, you know, how quickly like I can digress into like going from like a really healthy, balanced relationship to thinking things are falling apart.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you're kind of hinting at it, but how do we feel this has played into a work-life balance? You know, we've talked a little bit about personal relationships, but is that something where it feels like you're taking work home, even unintentionally, or you feel like you have to respond to these things after hours? I mean, you at the top of this conversation, Jess, you mentioned Alex sending you a text about the podcast. That's something that's kind of an after hours thing that you're getting a message about. And so are there other examples of that where you feel this pressure to respond?
I mean, I think it's any time there's a notification on your phone, it's like I keep my phone on silent pretty often, because the dings and all the other notification noises just would be overwhelming otherwise. And I use this phrase very lightly, because I don't use this like across the board with like every person that I would work with, but I do think it applies in a work situation where you kind of teach people how to treat you. And so for me, I, you know, in the habit of, oh, well, I can send him an email or her an email anytime because I know that she'll respond. I need to correct that and set some boundaries, or maybe go back and change something, and I think that it's a fixable thing. If you're kind of in a bad habit with doing this with work, it's like you can create boundaries and you can create some space for yourself where you're not completely stuck in this immediate response culture that we see so often. And I think we don't always realize we have that option once we're in a habit of doing something or responding all the time.
Well, and it probably just takes understanding on both ends of that. So like if it's your boss who's overstepping those bounds, having that conversation and making sure that they understand that, or sometimes even people set up kind of arbitrary languages. Like, well, I've had people say to me, oh, if I emailed you, that's no rush. But if I text you, you know, so it's just kind of like, okay, how do you understand even the avenues of communication, what that means to a certain people? That's a lot. It's a lot. But I think where it changes too is as we look at the generational differences. I mean, we talked about how older generations just had phone calls or wrote letters even. And I think about getting a letter, that's something you don't feel probably always a sense of urgency to sit down right away, read the letter, and start writing another one right away to send out. You do, maybe, but typically probably not. And so I think they just kind of naturally probably use technology the way they would have used anything else. So I think of older generations where I'll send a text and maybe not hear back for a day or so, but I almost know I'm going to hear back eventually. They're going to, you know, and they maybe just handle that better because they didn't give in to all the hype, or they didn't give in to the idea of I want to be a part of this machine. They'll just use it as it serves them.
I even find it endearing. Even my grandma called me yesterday, and she's going to watch a movie. And so she was like, the lady said I have to change the input to the HDMI input. And to me, I'm like, oh, that's so easy. But just to see the gap of just how different it has been, that we know where we have to function and kind of like where it hasn't been something like, oh, I need to know, or I need to figure this out.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the avenues of communicate. Like, I just think of even here at the church, there's email. We have something called Teams. Other places have Slack. And then there's like levels of, okay, you're in a Slack or Teams channel, but not necessarily is everything pertaining to you, but you need to know. Then there's like,
or an email thread,
or you've got to at somebody, like tag them in it so they actually see it. Or some people are in a channel, but they don't respond. Or some people, like, there's so many layers of like just the web that things can get stuck in. And then outside of that, you're like, well, then we've got like ClickUp, or you've got other Frame.io, which you can comment on video. Like, there's so many layers.
Depending on your work situation.
And sometimes like I just stress out about where in the world was that? Like, what, where did I communicate that? Was that in person? Was that in a text message? Like,
Facebook
so I'll
Messenger.
there's times where I'll just literally spend like 10 minutes trying to just figure out where did I send that and was that right? And so even that just becomes so overwhelming in communication that it's just exhausting. And then because everybody has their own preferences, like who uses what, who doesn't use what, and memorizing that for everybody. And it's we're not in a giant organization.
It's like you have to create a profile for each individual you're working with and go, okay, well, this person communicates this way and this person communicates that way. And then the idea that, I mean, in some ways we've evolved to just do that naturally. Like and I think older generations go, no, I don't have the capacity for that. I don't have the brain power for that. This is not how I've operated. And I think even of people, how many people I see driving and texting, and I'm thinking, if I've ever believed in any form of evolution, it is right there, because I don't know the number of people I look over at and their face is down on their phone and they're driving. We should have way more accidents than we do. Like, I don't know how people drive so distracted. Not every car is just in the ditch. And so it just makes me wonder, like, are we creating new synapses in our brain, like drawing new neural pathways that are almost just create this, I don't know, elevated, evolved version of ourselves where we manage this stuff. And some people can operate at that level and other people can't. But still, it's just those things that you're even mentioning, Alex. It's like, okay, I'm prioritizing that, trying to understand how people want to communicate with me, where I think older generations, that's just not an issue. It's like, okay, well, I mean, I'll have conversations with people of an older generation, and I'll sometimes end up bouncing between Facebook Messenger and text messages, and I don't even think they know they switched apps, So it just really depends on where your importance is placed, maybe.
And now you have tapbacks and emojis and like this isn't even just like how fast you respond, but it's like how or what, or even those other communication barriers for people that don't understand, like what
like what does that emoji or that GIF mean,
whatever.
So, like the grandma that always posts the crying laughing emoji, but they post it for sad things because they're like, it's crying, and like, why are you laughing at this, Grandma?
My dog died. Why are you laughing?
My grandma would send LOL, not like laugh out loud, but like lots of love.
My dog died. LOL.
Recently.
Oh, sweetie, LOL.
That's really good. I had not heard that. All right, yeah. So, I mean, do we think that? We talked about it probably quite a bit, but has social media significantly played a role in perpetuating this, or do you think it is kind of just one more thing, right, to add to it, and then there's all these other apps and each one has their own messaging avenue? It's
just social. I mean, it's all of it, because it's so much of it, like we even talked about at the beginning, like trying to navigate what is a social media even anymore, because everything kind of is trying to have that social aspect as a part of it. Things that began as like a track how far you run now are like a social media avenue. And so
well, I think there's people who just dismiss social media altogether, and so when you're someone who kind of values it to varying extents, and they're just like, I just don't use it, and they almost come from a place of I don't know, superiority. Well, I just don't use social media, so I don't have to worry about that.
But
and it's like, okay,
all of those
but yeah,
thrive on how many times we open it and how many times we like something and check something and respond. I mean, those organizations, there's a documentary on YouTube called Childhood 2.0, and it is psychologists that are hired by Google and Facebook and these big groups that are saying, how do we get more people to engage?
Yeah.
And it's like there's synopsis where it's like every like certain, and during certain amounts of time, they will send like a notification or what can we remind them of. And so it's like, we're kind of, as much as we're trying to set boundaries, like those things are also trying to pull us in. So it's not like we can just say, well, this works for me right now. We constantly have to be keeping up with then how technology and social media and expectations are changing.
Well, yeah, and then that makes you feel like maybe you're going to miss out on something. There isn't going to be a place for you in the future, like in the world of the future. If you're not keeping up, you're going to get passed by. And I mean, I think I've caught myself being wrapped up in that being part of my identity is like knowing everything and knowing what the new thing is and knowing what the trends are and knowing all the social media platforms like that. That's how I identify. I'm that person, and so.
And that's how you can add value.
Yeah.
Because that when someone comes and asks, you're able to have already been on the forefront and can answer some of those questions.
Right.
Okay, can I ask you a personal question about that, Eric?
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I think that you are that type of person. So does that put pressure on you in a negative way when I'm like, I'm just going to ask Eric, or I know I've asked you about like video games in the past, and I just like expect you to, and not in a bad way, but I just expect you to be up on.
It's a mixed bag. I think the thing that has always bothered me more is people think you can, because a certain aspect of technology like social media or something, they think you can fix their, 1995 Windows computer. You know what I mean? And they're like, oh, well, Eric can do that because he's a computer
you have to
guy.
Have it all.
Yeah. It's like if older generations especially think if you know computers, then you know everything about computers. Like it's just, okay, well, that's a little too broad. That probably annoys me more than people having legitimate questions about it. Because I get excited talking about it. Like that is life-giving to me. But I probably get more frustrated when people are dismissive of it. When they're like, "Oh, that I've heard the news about TikTok. Have you heard that? That's really bad. This is there's a lot of bad things on there." Or, "Oh, Elon Musk bought Twitter. That's dying. That's going away." And just
right.
And it's just these naive takes on things where they heard something secondhand and they regurgitate it. And I've always valued going in and learning firsthand about that sort of stuff. And it's just, that's not for everybody. I get it, but that's high value to me. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes I maybe am a little judgy when I hear that people don't care enough to learn for themselves. They just say what other people are saying about certain things. But yeah, I don't normally get bothered when people have questions. As long as I can help, I think that's as long as they feel I'm helping and I'm not just a problem, when they ask.
So like if somebody's like, I think you brought up, an example, Eric, earlier when you're like, I've just had to learn to be okay with not responding right away and hoping that those people are assuming the best in me and all that kind of stuff. But are there practical tips that we can give somebody that's maybe drowning in this, or they just are anxious? Like, what are some tips, whether it's, just a tip on your phone or a relational, conversational kind of tip that we're giving people to go address it? Like, what are just some ways that for somebody maybe feeling overwhelmed by this to take a step towards maybe freedom or step towards a life with a little bit less stress and anxiety related to?
I'll reiterate a little bit of what I said, but I do think the big part for me was not always apologizing for not responding. There's some times when I legitimately missed a text and then I will apologize because whoops, missed that, didn't see that. But I think I would always be like, oh, I'm so sorry I missed that. And it'd be like 15 minutes, So I think having to learn to not always ask for forgiveness and also to just be like, it's okay. Like, it's okay. Relax. You do not need to. And then I sympathize with you, Jess, or empathize, I guess, a lot because I always am guessing what other people's intentions are. And majority of the time, I'm assuming it's negative, no matter what. And that's just unhealthy, but it's really challenging for me to get over that. And that's not just in these types of communications. That's in a lot of interactions I have where I just typically default to, oh, that was a negative interaction. That person had negative intent. And that's like a personality defect. I mean, for me, it is, at least. I feel like I got to get over that because I am a person who kind of highly values my level of discernment, but sometimes that betrays me a little bit. And I think getting over that and realizing that, mistakes are going to happen and miscommunication is going to happen, and that's going to be okay.
Mm-hmm. I also think about a conversation I had recently where someone kept looking at their phone and they were like waiting for information to come in, and they were like, if I don't respond right away, like they're going to be upset. Or I think also like in connection with that, being aware of how we communicate our expectations to people. So if you don't respond, like I'm going to be upset with you. We're teaching people, and we're also like putting other people's feelings and emotions above our own needs. And right, like that's like the Christian, like Jesus loving thing to do. But I think that there are times where it can be so overdone that we aren't looking at like how we're feeling. So in situations where it's like, okay, I don't want to make Alex and Eric mad, so I'm going to compromise like how I feel to do that. And I think like we need to realize that we're important too, and our schedules and our identity is valuable too.
Yeah.
And it sounds so simple, but it's like, I don't think we're mindful of, if we're stressed out or having anxiety, well, where did that start?
Yeah.
And that's important too. And being aware of, I'm feeling overloaded and overwhelmed at the end of the day. Well, you're accessible every minute of your day until now. Mm-hmm. And so what do you need? And I think it goes back to, we've talked about boundaries before. A boundary is, what do I need to be in relationship with this thing? Mm-hmm. And I also think it's not ever too late to change what you're doing at work or in your personal life.
Yeah.
And we have that option. And I don't think we often give ourselves that option because we're such in a performance culture in work and our personal lives.
Paul, and he's talking in 1 Corinthians 6, and mostly about, sexual immorality, and it's, some of the famous passages are in there, like, do you not know your body's a temple of the Holy Spirit? And some of those things that we use, and most of that's around sexual immorality. But in verse 12 of chapter 6, he says, I have the right to do anything you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but I will not be mastered by anything. And I think there's this very fine line of ownership or being mastered that happens pretty quickly, where we begin by owning something, and somewhere along the lines it starts owning us. Like we begin by being the master of something, and somewhere along the lines we don't notice, all of a sudden we've been mastered by that. And I think our phones, technology, in my life has become one of those things where I think I own it, but if I can't give it up, I don't own it anymore. It owns me. And so I think using that from Paul is having this real inventory about, man, how much, if this is driving a lot of stress and anxiety and unhealth in my life, then maybe I don't own it anymore. It owns me. It's affecting my life. It's affecting how I do relationships. It's affecting me in a negative way. And maybe that's a telltale sign that, okay, maybe ownership has switched. And there's no shame in that. It's, okay, now I need to recognize, how do I take steps? And I think there's just practical things like, man, use those moments on your phone. Use those things, and you can program even in there, like an auto response. If you're worried about somebody, sending you a text message and them freaking out, maybe the gift you can give them is like, you can program it like, hey, I'm with my family right now and I'm not checking my phone. I'll get back to you tomorrow. Or maybe it's the emails, out of the office, and programming a lot of those things have become easier to do. Mm-hmm. And so maybe you're gifting yourself something, and you're gifting somebody else by setting up a moment like that with, because you can go in and customize kind of what it says. Most people have probably seen that when somebody's driving. If somebody's driving, your phone will automatically do it, and you've probably gotten the text back from somebody, hey, I'm driving right now, I'll get back to you. So you can go in and customize some of those moments, and maybe that will be just an easy first step for you that's practical to say, okay, I'm going to set these times where I'm not going to hear from somebody, and I'm going to also have my phone or email, whatever, auto respond to them, let them know
Yeah.
that I don't, and then most of those as well have like, if it's an emergency,
Yeah.
send again, you know? So, so it'll take the pressure off you, take the pressure off them. And maybe that will be one of those things that you can do and have those conversations, I think, you know, with people in your work, people in your life around, hey, I need to step back. I'm realizing like this is unhealthy for me and I just need to start prioritizing some of this right now. And so it's not you, you know, it's the classic, it's not you, it's me. But be honest about that and ask them, you know, and I'd love your help to help me in this. And I think most people would be willing to help and maybe not send that text or be aware of not assuming the worst intentions. And so I think that's just a small tool that you can use and leverage from technology to be able to actually redeem it instead of suck you in more.
Well, I think another thing from my own personal experience is it's so much, if you search your own soul, it's a lot about significance and what you're searching for, that significance and the value that you bring to others and that you want others to see value in you.
That's so good.
And so that's why you feel that tension, because you're like, oh, if I don't respond, they're going to look at me different. And I think we've expressed that several times, but it's when at the end of the day, it's about you and you're making it about you. And we want to say, oh, well, if I respond, you know, then they'll value me more. Where really it's like, it's not about putting others over you or you over others. It's more about, okay, how much, like, do I value myself? Do I value my time? And do I see value in me already? Or do I only feel value when others need me? And so when others need me, I'm going to respond because that proves to them and myself that I'm valuable and I have significance in this world. And for me, that's been the hardest struggle to overcome, is that my significance isn't in my value to others. My significance isn't in value to what I can do or what it's like, I'm here. People love me and I love others. And this is a mutual thing. It doesn't mean that I have to produce something more to be valued. And that's a really hard thing to get over. And I think especially in this culture where it's all about individualism and I got to make a name for myself and I got to have a social media presence and I need to be famous and I need to do this. And it's overwhelming. And I think at the end of the day, when you go, okay, I have value even if I don't respond right away. And that's, I don't know, it's a tough thing to get through. But
I'm like, even as you said that, I'm like, man, there's so many times that I have responded right away because I have a fear that they're going to go ask somebody else.
Yeah.
And now I'm not significant to them anymore. And that is that's so internal. Yeah. And it's so ill motivated. So that's such a good thing.
It's freeing when you start to relinquish that control and just go, oh, okay. It's scary and it's freeing at the same time. But
so good.
I think we've talked about this enough. Thank you, Alex and Jess, for having this conversation. Thanks to everybody for listening wherever you're at.
One last happy birthday, Jess.
Yeah, happy birthday,
guys.
Jess. Hopefully you found some value in this and it's something you can think about. And if you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to us. As we said earlier, leave us a voicemail. That's one of our favorite ways to hear from you. That's 402-885-9930. Or you can reach out to us on Instagram or TikTok at CCCOMA Podcast. Send us an email to podcast@cccomaha.org. But until next time, we'll talk to you then.